Imagine commanding a fleet so massive that entire nations trembled at the sight of your red sails on the horizon. Imagine being so powerful that the Chinese Empire, one of the greatest civilizations in history, had no choice but to negotiate with you as an equal. This isn't the plot of some fantasy novel. This is the true story of Shi Yang, known to history as Ching Shih, a woman who went from working in a floating brothel to commanding the largest pirate confederation the world has ever seen. We're talking about 80,000 pirates, 1,800 vessels, a floating empire that controlled the Pearl River and made the South China Sea her personal kingdom. But here's the most incredible part: she didn't just survive in a world designed to destroy women like her. She conquered it, rewrote the rules, and then negotiated her way into a peaceful retirement with full honors. So, how did a woman with seemingly no advantages become the most powerful pirate leader in human history? And what can her story teach us about building power from absolutely nothing? Let's go back to 1775. China is ruled by the Qing dynasty, and the South China Sea is chaos. Pirates aren't just thieves on boats. They're organized military forces controlling trade routes worth millions. Shi Yang starts her adult life working on a floating brothel. Not exactly what you'd call a promising beginning for world domination, right? But here's what most people don't understand about her situation. Floating brothels weren't just about entertainment. They were information hubs, political centers, places where merchants, officials, and yes, pirates came to do business. Think about it. Where better to learn about power, politics, and the art of negotiation than in a place where men came to relax and talk freely? In 1801, everything changes. She marries Zheng Yi, one of the most powerful pirate captains in the Confederation. But here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't some romantic love story. This was a strategic alliance. Zheng Yi was trying to unite the scattered pirate gangs into one massive force. And Shi Yang? She was learning everything she could about leadership, strategy, and how to control men who answered to no one. But fate had other plans. In 1707, Zheng Yi dies suddenly. And here's where most women would have been pushed aside, forgotten, their brief taste of power nothing but a memory. But Shi Yang wasn't most women. Within weeks of her husband's death, she had maneuvered herself into a position of power that should have been impossible. How? She understood something that her rivals didn't. In a world built on violence and chaos, the person who brings order becomes indispensable. First, she secured the loyalty of her late husband's most trusted captains. Then, she did something brilliant. She adopted her husband's young son from a previous relationship and ruled as his regent. This gave her legitimacy in a traditional society while keeping actual power in her hands. Can you imagine the political skills required to pull this off? She's a woman in imperial China, surrounded by thousands of armed men who've spent their lives taking what they want by force. And yet, she convinced them that their best chance for success was to follow her lead. But the real genius move was still coming. Ching Shih didn't just want to lead one pirate gang. She wanted to unite them all, and she understood that chaos was their enemy. Pirates fighting each other meant weakness. Unity meant power. So she did something unprecedented. She created a code of laws for her confederation. These weren't just simple rules. This was a comprehensive legal system governing everything from how battles were fought to how captured goods were distributed. Picture this: you're a merchant sailing through the South China Sea. You encounter pirates flying the red flag, but instead of facing random violence, you're presented with a formal system: taxes to pay, safe passage guaranteed if you comply. It was piracy, but piracy with rules, structure, and predictability. Think about that for a moment. Could you take a chaotic, violent organization and transform it into a disciplined force through sheer force of will and strategic thinking? This is where her background, working in information networks, paid off. She understood people. She knew what motivated them, what scared them, and how to get them to work together toward a common goal. By 1810, she commanded 6 major fleets, organized by colored flags: red, black, white, blue, yellow, and green. The Red Flag Fleet alone had 20,000 to 40,000 pirates and 200 to 300 junks. But numbers tell only part of the story. The real power was in the organization. Her confederation had admirals, captains, and a clear chain of command. They had rules for distributing loot, treating prisoners, and even regulating relationships between pirates and captives. She had essentially created a floating nation. At the peak of her power, Ching Shih's confederation controlled the Pearl River and the South China Sea. No merchant ship moved without paying her taxes. No fishing boat cast nets without her permission. The Chinese Imperial Navy, they were losing every battle. The Portuguese colonial authorities in Macau, they were paying her tribute to leave their ships alone. But here's what's truly remarkable. She wasn't just taking money, she was providing services, safe passage, protection from other pirates, dispute resolution. In many ways, she was running a more effective government than the actual government in the regions she controlled. Can you imagine the confidence, the sheer audacity required to look at one of the world's great empires and think, I can do this better? And for several years, she was right. But Ching Shih was too smart to believe this could last forever. The Chinese government was slowly getting its act together. International pressure was mounting. She could see that her confederation was becoming too big, too visible, and too threatening for the established powers to ignore. So she started planning for the most difficult challenge of all: how to step down from absolute power and survive. In 1810, Ching Shih made a decision that showed just how brilliant she really was. Instead of fighting to the bitter end, instead of going down in flames like so many other pirate leaders, she chose to negotiate. But this wasn't surrender. This was a negotiation between equals. Think about the psychology here. She's sitting across from representatives of the Chinese Empire, an institution that had ruled for thousands of years. And she's dictating terms, not just for herself, but for thousands of her followers. Her demands were stunning. She wanted official recognition for her officers in the Imperial Navy. She wanted amnesty for her followers. She wanted to keep a personal fleet of 120 junks and 17,000 followers. And she wanted an official title and position for herself. Would you have the nerve to make demands like that when you could simply be executed as a pirate? The Chinese government could have refused. They could have kept fighting. but they knew something that history remembers. Ching Shih held all the cards. Her confederation was too powerful to defeat quickly, and every day of continued warfare was costing the empire enormous amounts of money and prestige. So they said yes to almost everything. In 1810, Ching Shih officially surrendered her fleet and accepted a position in the Imperial Navy. But calling it surrender misses the point entirely. She had negotiated one of the most favorable peace treaties in Chinese history. She kept personal command of 120 warships and 17,000 followers, larger than most national navies of the time. She received the title of Lady by Imperial Decree and a substantial pension. Many of her former captains were integrated into the Imperial Navy with official ranks. But here's the most amazing part. She didn't just fade into obscurity. She returned to Canton, where she operated a gambling house and brothel. She maintained her network, her influence, and her wealth until her death in 1844. Think about this trajectory. Floating brothel to pirate empress to respected member of society. In a culture where women were supposed to be invisible, she had made herself so powerful that the establishment had no choice but to accept her on her own terms. Ching Shih's story challenges everything we think we know about power, gender, and what's possible when someone refuses to accept the limitations placed on them. She didn't have royal blood. She didn't inherit an army. She didn't have the backing of any government or institution. What she had was intelligence, strategic thinking, and an absolute refusal to let other people define what she could or couldn't achieve. But here's what I find most inspiring about her story. She understood that real power isn't just about commanding others. It's about creating systems that work, building loyalty through competence, and knowing when to fight and when to negotiate. In a world that told her she was worthless, she proved that leadership isn't about where you start. It's about what you do with the opportunities you create for yourself. So, what can Ching Shih's incredible journey teach us today? First, never underestimate the power of understanding people and systems. She succeeded because she took the time to learn how power really worked, not how it was supposed to work. Second, sometimes the greatest strength comes from bringing order to chaos. In any situation where confusion reigns, the person who can create structure and predictability becomes invaluable. Third, know when to pivot. Ching Shih could have fought the Chinese Empire to the death, but she was smart enough to recognize when negotiation would serve her better than continued conflict. Fourth, your past doesn't define your future. She refused to be limited by other people's expectations about what someone with her background could achieve. And finally, real leadership means taking care of the people who follow you. She didn't just look out for herself, she negotiated amnesty and positions for thousands of her followers. The woman who commanded 80,000 pirates teaches us that with enough intelligence, determination, and strategic thinking, there are no limits to what we can achieve, even when the entire world seems designed to stop us.